Oh, this is John Mata, chair of R Manhattan, and this is our R Manhattan Live City Commission interview series. And we're starting off with Scott Seel, who's running for City Commission with the election coming up in November. The R Manhattan is a local political action committee. We, for the most part, limit ourselves to just local issues and local candidates, mostly city commission, county commission, and school board, although we do go into state representatives. We try to stay away from federal offices, although we sometimes go off the wagon and talk about an issue or two, but we really don't bring anybody on or do interviews or anything in depth with those federal issues. So we have Scott here, myself, we have Ed McNamara, who's our producer, who may pop on the screen from time to time. And to get started, I'm going to have Scott introduce himself, give a little background, why he's running. And the only question I'll ask about his introduction is if he could give us kind of three top priorities that he wants to accomplish on the city commission. I've gone my 8th year on the commission, and when I used to campaign or someone asked about it, I always said we should have three top things that you emphasize over and over again. He doesn't have to do that, obviously. It's up to him, but I kind of found that's what people would like to know to identify with. So thank you very much for coming, Scott, and I'll turn it over to you. Oh, let me say one more thing. We do have a list of questions. Scott actually answered a series of questions that we put to all the candidates. He was the first one to actually respond back. That's why he's on first. And we'll go over those. But really the top priority is you do comments with questions. We'll be looking at those and we'll pull those in, unless it's redundant or something that we've already covered. So I just want to let you know. So over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Commissioner. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you guys having me on. And your advocacy in the community is important. Even I'm a big believer in everyone across all ends of the spectrum should be involved and plugged in and advocate for their issues. And I appreciate you guys doing that. As far as the three issues. So the two kind of main issues that I think are coming up for me in this is number one is housing. I'm a realtor in town. I've been an advocate for workforce housing in this town for several years, and that's kind of a timely issue. So that is one issue that comes up a lot. And the other, I think, is just the budget and fiscal responsibility, and approaching that, getting a way to figure that out and do that in a way that makes the most sense. But as far as a third issue, I would just say is just being a problem solver. Is whatever the issue is that comes up that is timely, is approaching things with an open mind, listening to all sides, informing myself on all the intricacies of what we're doing, and trying to come up with a solution that's best for the community. And focusing on those solutions rather than what the problem might be, but like let's solve the problem. Let's get stuff done, and not worry about who gets credit and who to blame and all that. Just get stuff done.
So, okay, the one thing that I kind of mentioned, it was some of the notes that I sent to you, and it was kind of a theme throughout when you answered the questions, was that you want to be non-ideological, and in a lot of the questions you were, well, I got to see what's presented at the time. And a lot of candidates, you're not unique in that respect. That's the way a lot of people run. But some people get a little turned off by that because they're saying, well, I want a little ideology because I want to know for sure, what you're gonna do. And you mentioned about the fiscal responsibility, because I know I have the reputation, I'm the taxpayer advocate. I'm going to fight to keep your mill levy down. And so, people relate to that and say, yeah, I know Mata's going to do that. So what's your response to people like me who have a little challenge, like that? I like you a little more definite on issues.
Sure.
Versus, how can I really tell?
I'm gonna date myself a little bit here and say, I always try to think about it as I don't want to have a George H.W. Bush read my lips, no new taxes moment, where I've made an ideological pledge, and I get myself stuck in between doing what is the right thing to do and sticking to a pledge. So, I think John, you on the law board probably wrestled with that a little bit with the recent law board budget that passed. That we wanted to make sure that we were able to get a pay raise increase for the police officers, which I think was good. But that may have also resulted in a little bit of a property tax increase for the city budget. And that's so we just I want to leave open that if it's the right thing to do, I'm never going to take anything off the table completely without knowing the facts at a time. So I will be someone that's going to be looking for responsibility, fiscal responsibility, and sometimes that may say, okay, I don't want to vote for this because there's a property tax increase associated with that. And if I'm going to vote for a property tax increase, then I would want to make sure that there's a good reason for it, and that the property tax, that the people in the city of Manhattan are getting something out of that, and that it's in the best interest of the community. So
That's fair. I know you know, I'm often very specific, but I always do say, if I deviate, I owe you an explanation why I'm deviating from what you would think normally I do. I would always say, I like you should be able to guess me 9 out of 10 times with that 10th time.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I will tell everybody from the far left to the far right and everything in between is that I promise to do my best to inform myself, to do what I think is right. And if you disagree with me, I'll listen, and I'm open to criticism, and I'm open to hearing from everyone. And I'm never going to vote in a way that makes everyone happy. There's always going to be anybody on the political spectrum. There's going to be a time where I make a vote that they may not like, and that's okay. That's the way the system is supposed to work. And I've always, Commissioner Butler is one that we've talked over the years, and I've always appreciated his ability to. I can sit down and talk to him, and we can have a disagreement, and it be civil. And sometimes I'll convince him, and sometimes I won't. And so that's kind of one of the things that I want to do as a commissioner, is be that person that I'll sit down and talk to just about anybody. I'll hear what they have to say, and they might convince me or they might not. But just try not to be, before I even hear the facts of a situation, already have my mind made up.
Okay. I'm going to touch on one other thing, and then we do have a couple questions that
Sure.
are coming in. You mentioned the housing is one of your priorities. One of the questions that we asked had to talk about the incentives like RHID, industrial revenue bonds.
Mm-hmm.
We also have that sales tax in there. And how do you feel about using those incentives? And let me paint the picture here. I'm in favor of using those. The last 2 times I ran, I said I was for the workforce housing. I even said I'm probably going a little out of character on some
Mm-hmm.
of that. Um, and and some of the people, it's not that they did not keep supporting me, but they definitely disagreed with me a lot on there. And I think there is a strong sentiment, and I know at least one candidate who's ferociously saying no
Yeah.
to all that stuff. And there is a sentiment in town of just saying of that are just don't want to do any of it. So just first of all, the question that we already asked, which was it was in the list that you answered. How do you feel about those incentives? And what do you say to what looks like a growing number just wants to shut that down?
Yeah. So let me first of all, and I've been pretty open and on the record about all this, is I do support. I support. I've said we have an all of the above housing problem. We need an all of the above housing solution, and I continue to advocate for that. When we're talking about subsidies, I want to be a careful steward of those subsidies. I want to make sure that they're going where they need to go, that they're providing what we want and what we need in the market. And what I've always said, Joe Knopp has said many times in the commission meetings, that we need to be focusing on projects that would not happen, that would not fly on their own without the subsidy. The subsidy is not intended to make already profitable projects more profitable. It's intended to be able to open up avenues and doors that weren't open before. And I have, there's been folks on kind of both ends of the political spectrum that have felt like those subsidies for private companies to develop residential housing are inappropriate, and I think there's a fair argument to be made there. But my response to those folks is that's fine, but I need you to understand and accept that means that there will only be residential development on the far extremes of the income spectrum. You're going to have the nonprofit world, and I serve on the board of Habitat for Humanity of the Northern Flint Hills. So I'm another housing MHK that's doing the Sunflower Flats, which I know you as a board member of MHA are familiar with and have been a great advocate for. So I'm all about that. I do agree that the nonprofit world has a role to play on the low end of the income spectrum, but they're limited in their capacity. And the other end of the income spectrum, where the free market is able to do what they can do and make it profitable, which is why you still see residential development happening in Colbert Hills and on the east side and the Miller Ranch area. But those are, I mean, you're now getting it up into 350 plus for any kind of new construction in those areas, and we're seeing $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 specs now that 5 years ago you never would have seen. So I think if you do that, if you say that we're not going to do this subsidy, okay, fine, but you are saying you are shutting out the entire middle of the income spectrum from any kind of residential development at all. And I think that's troublesome for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's just shutting out an entire, the bell curve of most homeowners in Manhattan from any kind of newer construction property. But from a city perspective, I think it's bad because number one, we've talked about wanting to grow the tax base, right? That's how, in my opinion, you are able to keep property tax and the mill levy under control in spite rising costs, is by lowering the base so that one mill raises more money than it would have previously. So if we want to do that, the two ways to do that are to bring in business and private sector employers, and to add housing. And in order to bring in business, the number one thing we hear when we're talking to prospective businesses into the city of Manhattan is, where are my people going to live? And if we're only building nonprofit low-income housing and $500,000 Colbert Hills housing, we're missing that product that those people need. But also, we're not able to grow our tax base on the residential side of adding more doors, adding more roofs to the community. So I think it actually ends up shooting us in the foot a little bit on the property tax side of things, because we just, the only way to raise more money when we're not changing the other side of that fraction is to increase the mill levy.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get Mr. Producer. Can we get some of those questions we have over there?
Yeah. So I'm going to read these in case people are just listening.
Are you able to get them up or?
Yeah. So Frank Beer says, how do you square the fact that you work directly for the Democrat Party as an employee and also advocated for liberal issues in the past?
I honestly, I don't know what it means to square it. I don't square it. I don't hide from it. It's all you have to do is read my LinkedIn profile and see that happened. That was coming on 20 years ago now that I worked for the Democratic Party. And I don't know what you're referring to when it comes to advocating for liberal issues, but I'm no longer a registered Democrat. I'm registered unaffiliated, have been for almost 2 years now. And there's a lot of reasons for that I'd be happy to get into in a long philosophical coffee session with somebody, but I don't think it's really relevant here. I've been pretty open about where I stand on the issues. And, a lot of the stuff, there's not a Democrat or a Republican way to pave a road. And the city commission is nonpartisan for a reason, in my opinion. Most of the issues that the city commission deals with don't really get into partisan politics, and I think that's good. So I don't really know what else to say to that. What I always tell people, and this is the God's honest truth, is my liberal friends say I'm too conservative, and my conservative friends say I'm too liberal. We have some honest to God liberals in this city commission race, and I think if you ask them if I was a liberal, they would vehemently tell you the answer to that question is no. So I don't know what I am, but I don't know. I don't know how to say that in a way that will satisfy you. So I don't know what else to say.
Okay. All right. The next question. Melissa Rhodes asks about the aquatic center. How do you feel about the aquatic center that they're proposing?
Yeah, this is a hot topic that a lot of people ask me about, and I'm undecided at this point. I definitely have concerns of how we do it, where we do it, what it ends up being, and it's one of those. As I said in the questionnaire, the devil's in the details. We don't even really know exactly what that's going to be yet, so it's hard to say whether I'm for or against. What I would say is that I need to be shown that it makes sense fiscally and practically. I need to be shown that we've learned from the last couple of big construction projects that we did, that we don't have any surprise, we can't actually afford to do this after all situations. So it depends on how big the project ends up being, how much it's gonna be, what it does, where it does, and those are still some unanswered questions. So I would say,
I'll just interject that on the the indoor aquatic center, it is in the eye of the beholder too, because the question we asked you, we used $40 million. Some of the numbers have come in $55-60 million.
Yep. And that's why
people who say they want it, but it doesn't need to have a lazy river and some of the other things. But when the city Parks and Rec came out with their visionary thing, they were in that $40 to $50 million range. And the one thing I like to throw out in that same document, they said for an adult, a daily pass was $10, $50 monthly, $540 annually, and for a family, $10 per person daily, $170 a month for a family, and $1,730 annually. And there's that one Facebook page says something about Manhattan that's got like 25, 30,000. I put it out on there. Didn't get a single person who liked any of those numbers. Mm-hmm. Then again, that's a very negative page.
Yeah, they don't like anything. So yeah, I think it would be neat to have one, sure, but how much is it going to cost? Where are we going to put it? And so, but ultimately, I think it's going to be an issue that's one way or another is going to get decided by the voters. So there's some convincing left to be done, but I'm listening. So,
all right. The next question is from Randall Andrews.
Andrews is the name.
Andrews, sorry. Okay. Scott, thank you for running for the commission. Share what you believe the mission of the city commission is for our community. Do you believe the commission should agree to fund social services, and if so, to what extent?
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. I do serve on the board of directors for several nonprofits here in town. I already mentioned Habitat and a few others. And I come to view the city commission similar to a nonprofit board like that. I believe the city commission's role is to provide vision and direction to city staff, and then accountability after the fact. So we set the direction, we set the course, the city staff executes that direction. But they are accountable. Well, the city manager directly accountable, but to make sure that after the fact, we're okay. Did we meet? Are we going in the direction that we want to be going? As to social services, like I said, involved in a lot of them actively and in depth, and they're struggling. They're struggling a lot, even with the Social Services Advisory Board, or I can't remember what the new acronym is, but. So yes, I do support this doing that. In what capacity and to what extent, I think I don't have problems with the way it is right now. But as with all things, I would be open to reviewing that and always making sure that it still makes sense. I don't think I'm ever going to be someone that just says, no, we should do that because that's the way we've been doing it. If it doesn't make sense anymore, or if somebody comes up with a better idea, I'm always all ears.
I'll kind of continue with this one a little bit because I've been throwing out some ideas on the current commission. And one, and I've said this before, is it really the role of the commission to basically make charitable contributions with taxpayer money? It is that what we should do. And I use two examples. One example is our current budget debate and wanting to give salary increases to staff. And I said, well, if we use that social services money, we can give increases. In a sense, you're making a decision not to, which means you either raise taxes or you don't give those increases. Or the other example I use as a big issue is the condition of streets. And I said, if you take that 550,000 over the past 10 years, that would have been $5.5 million worth of street repairs that would have been done in the city. And, isn't that really the prime reason? One of the, I mean, police, fire, streets, sewer, water, those, I mean, they're not sexy topics, but that's really the thing we're supposed to do. So I'll let you chew on that one, and then I've got one other follow up on that one.
Yeah, I think I certainly understand that philosophy. I'm personally am still going to be an advocate for some sort of support of social services. That there's a lot of evidence that the social services can in addition to just benefiting the community, can also be cost savings in the long run if you're able to bring people up out of poverty or help in that respect. So, but I think that if we have a lot of social services and nonprofits in our community that would be devastated by the loss of the city funding that they get, I'm skeptical that if all of a sudden that city funding wasn't there, that the difference would be made up in additional private contributions. Every nonprofit that I'm on, that's every day is just fighting to be able to raise enough money for the grants do a really good job of funding the big picture, but it's just the month to month cash flow issues so I think we would see a very significant negative impact to the community if all of a sudden those funds weren't there.
Yeah. The other debate we've had on it on the commission is, you've been on the group, so there's a lot of there's money given to a lot of different organizations. It could be anywhere from 2,500 to 30,000, and the other debate is, well, if we're going to do this, should we really have the commission set a priority and say it's mental health, homelessness, and food insecurity, and give good chunks of money to the biggest, best organizations who attack those things, whether they be Pawnee, be able, and pick your third that would go along with it. In really what I call kind of the shotgun approach. Does that really get us the biggest bang for the buck?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and truthfully, I don't know the answer to that. What I do think, as you know, and you kind of alluded to, I served on the Special Alcohol Advisory Board when it existed on its own, and my view is those people, they're volunteer boards now. It's the CISFAB are donating their time and expertise to make a determination of how to spend that money. And I'm a believer that, except in extreme circumstances of basically fraud and malfeasance, I would, as a commissioner, defer to the judgment to the people that were appointed to do that. And so, to the extent of giving them direction and guidance, I think I would definitely be open to that. But I don't want to get into micromanaging how the board allocates those funds. I think if we're going to do that, we might as well just not have the board and let the commission do it. But I do like the current setup where we have a citizen advisory board that is helping direct where those funds go.
Okay. I'm going to skip now we had someone who submitted some questions when we first put out that you were going to be on. Mm-hmm. Well, that's Reese. And so what we haven't hit that he asked was, are you, and I must say up front, he really wanted yes/no answers to this. You can choose.
I'll do my best.
Are you for closing the Northview swimming pool, which, this was raised at one point in time as a possible issue of going to one main pool and things like that?
I will say no. And then Walt stop listening, and if anybody else wants to hear more thoughts, so my parents just live a couple blocks from the Northview Pool. It has a positive space in my heart. So generally speaking, it would take some pretty strong convincing or some pretty strong financial constraints to get me there. Like I said, I will always listen to anything, but I love that pool, and I love that we have neighborhood pools that kids can walk to, and that means a lot to me. So it would be a pretty severe situation to get me to vote to close the Northview Pool.
And maybe just a little interjection on this whole pool thing, because his next question was about the indoor aquatics, which you've already talked about. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about Manhattan as a community is we have 3 pools right now. Like Lawrence has 1 pool. Communities our size usually don't have 3 pools. And then we're also talking about an indoor aquatic center, which I'd be a strong advocate. If you are going to do it, you need to do it one of the places we already have one, because you don't want to go to 4 pools.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I'm not saying I would be support that, but that would probably be one of the only ways that I would even start listening is in a situation like that. And I don't know that site works for that, but that's, a hypothetical example.
I would say the big leaning now for the one side is Seco.
Yep.
His other is, are you in favor of spending millions of dollars on the riverfront project?
So I think riverfront's a good example, kind of similar to what we've talked about with the aquatic center. Is I think it's a neat idea. I liked including it in the future plan for the parks as just like a vision, but it's all going to come down to, does it make sense? And I think if you were to ask me today, will you fund this project today to start construction today? No, I don't think we're there. But I think it's a neat idea. I think a lot of towns that have riverfronts is a really cool thing. And if at some point in the future it's a situation where the development makes sense, then like I said, I like the idea, but I don't know that we're there right now. And I don't think even Bill Anderson's a really good friend of mine, and I don't think even he thinks we're there right now. It's really more of a future oriented thing. So it's a cool idea. I like being something that we're like, in the future, it would be cool if we had this, but when the rubber meets the road, it's going to come down to, does it make sense financially? And is it in the best interest of the community as a whole? So.
Okay. And then his last one is, are the city streets a top priority?
Well, yeah, I think they're all, regardless of their condition, they should still be a top priority, because it's one of the important things that the city does. And this is one area where I confess to needing to learn a lot more. And that's actually, I always tell people I'm a nerd. I love learning about the inner workings of this. And that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to most, if I am fortunate enough to get elected, is to really diving in and learning about how to do the streets and how it's done and what the approach is. So I do think that there's a lot of improvement that can be had there. And I always have a saying, you can complain about potholes or you can complain about road construction, but you can't do both. So I definitely want to see us take strides there and figure out, okay, what can we do better? Is that a staffing issue? Is that what's the approach that's not getting the job done? And figure out what that is and go from there. But so yes, I would say roads are, for any commissioner at any time, should be a top priority. It's infrastructure. That's what the city commissions, 85% of what they should be doing is these boring infrastructure things that only weird people like me think are cool.
So, okay, I think Ed's got a question for you.
Hey, Scott, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It's somewhat related to the roads question, but I was just wondering if you had any opinions on making the city more pedestrian friendly. There are areas of the city where there's just a sidewalk that just stops and then it continues, like on Fort Riley Boulevard over just past 17th Street.
Yep.
And also in the same vein, if you have any opinions on making the city more bicycle friendly.
Sure. I think those are both things that would be good to do. And as we reconstruct, anytime we're tearing something up that we were already tearing up, like we should be thinking about how we can make it more the bus and for pedestrians and for bikers and all these things that, like, when we're going back and building it anyway, we might as well do it in a way that's conducive for all of those things. But again, all of that costs money, and so it's trying to prioritize where that money is spent and how it's spent. So in general, yes, I love pedestrian friendly. I love to go on walks. I love making it so that people can walk places as their mode of transportation if they want to. I think those are all admirable, but just do it where it makes sense. And that's where, like I said, when we're reconstructing something that was already torn up, by all means, let's implement those things as much as we can, as much as makes sense. And it's something that I like and have positive feelings towards, but it just comes down to, can we make the money work?
Can I ask one more? Just related the same way? Because that was kind of an easy question. Everybody likes bicycle and pedestrian sidewalks. But here's a more of a black and white one. What do you think about traffic circles versus just a four-way intersection?
You lose regardless of how you answer that one. So
yeah. It just made me make half the people in the world mad, right? I am a believer in traffic circles when they're used correctly, which is the big thing. Like, if you can use them correctly, I think anybody who's been in Manhattan before the traffic circles knows how 3rd and 4th Street backed up 3 lights back at Bluemont and Tuttle Creek Boulevard. And for the most part, that doesn't happen anymore. And that's because of those traffic circles. On Tuttle Creek Boulevard, I used to live out by Tuttle Creek Lake. I use that intersection at the dam every single day. It's one of the deadliest intersections in Riley County. It's a mess right now, but when that's done, that traffic circle there is going to be significantly safer than that intersection was, just because it reduces the speed of oncoming traffic when you're coming through there. So again, like anything, you got to use them right, and they got to be used. They don't work in every situation, but when used correctly, I think the traffic circle makes traffic flow better and makes it more safe.
Yeah. Maybe just to interject a little on the street issue, if you go back before, because there's a special sales tax that was passed to help with the street improvements.
Yep.
Before that was passed, the streets were paid with this special street and highway fund, which is basically your gas tax.
Right.
And that's getting tougher as cars are more efficient and people are going to hybrids and electric cars. And then money from the general fund, general property taxes and sales taxes. And then the sales tax was sold as a way that we could really improve the streets and get a jump on things and get them much better.
Yeah.
If you look at the last number of budgets, streets are funded by this special street and highway tax and sales tax, and nothing from the general fund. So sales or property taxes, which means we really didn't get a jump on it. All we did just do a substitute for
Right.
Funding sources. And I know that's a lot of people in town have angst on that because they were sold this was supposed to get us over the hump, but
yeah, I don't think anybody
really just got diverted.
7 years ago or whenever that was past pre-COVID had any anticipation of what prices were going to do over the period of time, and so it's a whole new world now, and that's unfortunate.
Okay, now I've got to get it kind of caught up because we've been jumping around on different things. The one was again has to do with taxes, sales tax and property tax, and these are obviously the two main things that fund the city. Which of these two sources do you think should be the primary revenue source of the city?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a particular opinion on which should be the primary. I mean, I think, in the legislative world, as Frank mentioned, I had in my past worked in the legislature. We talked about the 3-legged stool. Obviously, City of Manhattan doesn't have income tax, so it's really more of a 2-legged stool. In the past, sales tax obviously is a regressive form of taxation, but at the same time, it's also sharing the tax burden with people outside the community. So I think there's now that we don't have sales tax on food, that the regressive nature of sales tax maybe is slightly less concerning to me than it would have been previously. So I don't have where I could say I specifically favor one more than the other. I don't like paying either one of them. So I want to keep both of them as low as possible. We don't want to, car dealers are concerned too. We don't want to be driving people to other communities to buy their cars, so we have to be mindful of where that sales tax lies with our competing neighbors, especially as we grow into Pottawatomie County. We've got a completely different level of taxation there. So we need to be conscious of all that. And just like I said, it's really just about trying to keep doing everything we can to keep all forms of taxation as low as we can, but still meeting the needs of the community.
That's it. Now going to Parks and Rec, and we've already touched on the pools and that type of stuff. But the city right now is going through an initiative which I supported, which is trying to get our cost recovery rate up. And what that is the amount of money that's paid for by, fees, people using facilities or participating, versus just the tax subsidy that goes to Parks and Rec. And right now we're probably 26% cost recovery, and what's deemed best practice is 35 to 40%.
Mm-hmm.
And the new recreation fees that were put in for the new rec centers was part of trying to get that up. Now, it's more than just the fees you charge, though. That's also sponsorships, like, naming rights and things of that nature, which we've been terrible at. I mean, most communities you go to the baseball field, there's also signs all over the outfield, which hopefully we'll get to soon, but we should have been doing that 50 years ago, and we missed out. So that part, I think, is the easy part. People get upset with is the fee part. What's your view on that? Do you support this initiative to get up to that best practice rate? I mean, if you think about it, we've gradually been doing it, because if you go back far enough, the zoo used to be.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I use the rec centers on a regular basis. It was better when it was free than when it was not free. But at the same time, I want the rec center. I want the rec center to be there. I want to be able to use it. And the only way it was going to make sense is if we had an admission fee. So, that's one of the things that I use as an example of what I talk about focusing on the solution rather than the problem, is when we realized that we didn't plan for all of the expenses that were going to be associated with that. And maybe there was some, the selling of that sales tax was maybe not completely, didn't reflect what it ended up being. Like, once we figured that out, I feel like too many of us we were still upset about that. And it's like, okay, that's already done. That's water under the bridge. We want to learn from it and make sure it doesn't happen again as we talk about the aquatic center. But now how do we fix it? And that's what I want to focus on is, okay, we know what the problem was. Everybody agrees with what the problem was. Let's move on now and talk about a solution. How do we keep them open? Because I think everybody, or most of the community, wants them. They're great. We've already built them. We might as well keep them. They get used a lot. How do we keep them open? And so I want to be conscious of accessibility, because I never want anyone to be denied access to the rec center or to the aquatic center, should it be built, or the pools or youth sports, because they can't afford it. And so we need to have, and we do have, I feel like we're doing a good job with the scholarship program and the Parks Foundation to make sure that accessibility is not an issue. But we also want to be able to have some cost recovery. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And walking that line, balancing that so that we are not pricing people out of the service. But at the same time, we want to be smart about, hey, Parks and Rec doesn't make money. In any city government, that's the one that loses the most money. And anything that we can do to mitigate that and bring that a little bit. It doesn't need to make, it doesn't need to be profitable, but at least a little bit more self-sustaining. Then I think that's a good thing, provided we are not increasing obstacles to people being able to use the service.
Yeah, and the one thing I just throw in is that there are scholarships. There's a group with the community foundation that sets that up, that raises money for that. A lot of the people doing that are people that have been advocates for a lot of Parks and Rec's programs, but understood that it's going to cost a lot of money and the fees would be higher, and we're stepping up to provide those things.
Yep, and I think that's a great thing.
Now, the city currently has 3 special sales taxes: the street maintenance, which we've already talked about, Parks and Rec quality of life, which was 20.25, that goes in 28. And usually that's one like that's been put in there to pay for something like the rec centers.
Right.
And usually if you're going to renew it, you're going to renew it to do something. To have it done. But the thing that people don't often realize is that's to build it, not to maintain it and to run it later. And then there's the economic recovery and relief, which is half a cent, and part of that goes for economic development, like 20%, 10% goes for workforce housing, and then 70% for infrastructure and debt reduction. So are you in favor of renewing those? And then particularly on that economic development one, there's a little formula at the end. You'd be looking for keeping that the same way, tweaking it, just your feedback on those, because those all be coming up, for the new commission coming in to figure out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll be candidly, I supported and voted for each of those when they were on the ballot. I think that they do a lot of good things. I am a huge proponent of the workforce housing portion of that sales tax. And as far as the Chamber and Economic Development is concerned, I don't have any major concerns right now with how that's going. But I'm never going to be a rubber stamp one way or the other. I'm always open to reconfiguring. And I'm a big believer and a big supporter in, show me results. So when that comes up, we look back at results, and whenever we're using those funds, there should be criteria, and I feel like we've done a much better job lately. The last 10 years as opposed to the 10 years before that, and I'm approximate year on those, but you know what I mean, of making sure that you got to show that you're getting results. And if the results aren't there, then the results aren't there, and we need to change course. And I'm always open to that. But at the moment, I don't feel a huge compulsion to go out there and wholesale change how those are distributed.
So that 70, 20, 10, you're pretty comfortable with that?
Yeah, but like I said, if somebody wanted to say, let's increase the workforce housing, I'd definitely be interested in that and listening to whether that makes sense. But yeah, I think it's done okay so far, and there might be ways to do it better, and I'm always willing to listen to that.
So as I mentioned, that the one that had to do with the like the building of the recs, the recreation quality of life. Usually those are done to build something, and then you go on from there, and usually there's another project if you want to do it. One of the things we talked about at the last city commission retreat, and I know a lot of commissioners really like this, I know staff really, really likes this, is looking for, a rather large sales tax initiative to put out in the 3/4 or full percent range. And the city can do that, and it could be without a time limit or a 20-year very extended time period. But the idea with that is to provide enough money in that tax to fund Parks and Rec. And it was to even roll the aquatic center in under that. So
take it out of the general fund entirely.
Yeah. So one is to build it, but also to provide the money to run it. But it was more of a build as you go.
Yeah.
So it was which was what the rec centers was really getting the money first and then building it. Some of the indoor aquatic people don't like it because it's going to take a while to get that built. But the city likes the idea from the standpoint of, well, look, Park and Rec is almost like an enterprise fund or something. It's all by itself. It's
Yep.
fully funded. Now, right now, there's a lot of general fund money that's going to Parks and Rec. Well, then that money, in essence, gets taken and is put in a pot to basically solve all the city's fiscal
Mhm.
problems. And there's, which was appealing to some commissioners because it's like, I call it the Nirvana tax. It solves all
Yeah.
the problems. And my feedback was I would like the city to get their fiscal house in order before they do something like that. And to a smaller example, that street tax is kind of like that's what that was a little bit of that was in there. Is that's what we did. We just took away from one side to pay for the other. So that was some very seriously being thought about, looked at. Was thinking about maybe even doing that this year, and I think there was such a hullabaloo about City Park and putting the aquatic center
Right.
there that it made it so no one thought it would pass because there was just so much angst because
Yep.
of that, and not enough time to figure out where to put it because no one thinks you're going to get initiative passed unless you say exactly where you're going to put that
Right.
thing. So, what's your reaction to
Yeah,
that plan?
I've heard the proposal before, and I think it's intriguing. I would want to learn more because I don't pretend to be an expert about it right now, but I think it's something that I could be open to. Um, it would be in replace of the Parks and Rec tax that we already have. Is that the first one?
Right. In other words, yeah, they would
Yeah.
kind of just take that and roll it into it. So that's where you could get it instead of being a full percent. It might be a full percent,
Yeah.
but then you sunset that other one. So net, it's more like 3/4.
Right. Yeah. So that that's something that's definitely intriguing to me. I feel like there's a good we got a good start there, and something that I at least feel like could be a good idea, unless there's something that I don't know about it that is a big deal breaker. Is but replacing that existing Parks and Rec sales tax with something like that's more of a general that can take that Parks and Rec off the general fund and have a specific. And also, we have a community where I don't know what the actual percentage is, but 10-20% of the people that are using our parks don't live in the city of Manhattan. So, they're not paying property taxes to go pay for those parks if they live in Pot County, if they live out by the lake.
Oh, yes.
So if we do it as a sales tax, then we can start getting more of the people who are using the services also helping pay for them.
Well, that's one of the questions that, again, debate is whether if you live outside the city, should you be paying a higher fee?
Yeah.
For those user fees. Where do you stand on that?
I mean, I think it's something you got to look at, and there are other communities that do it. My family a couple of years ago went to, I think it's called the Deanna Rose Wild Park and Zoo in Overland Park, or one of those cities in Johnson County, and it was $20 to get in unless you're an Overland Park citizen, and then it was free. So it's not unheard of. There are logistical concerns on how what the check to see who's a citizen and who isn't. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me that it's like in-state tuition for a college. It's cheaper for my kid to go to K-State because I've been paying taxes in the state of Kansas for 42 years. So it makes sense to me that it could be cheaper for a Manhattan city resident who's paying property taxes in the city of Manhattan, that it shouldn't cost the same for me to go in the rec center than for someone who hasn't been paying property taxes in the city of Manhattan. So I'd be open to that for sure.
Okay, I think we got a follow-up question online.
Yeah, Randall again asks, do you believe the chamber can show results on economic development over the past few years?
Randall, my honest answer to that question is I don't know. I do. As if I were to be elected, that would be something that when we're talking about renewing this, I'm gonna demand. Even though I'm a chamber member, I'm a chamber supporter, I'm still gonna ask them to say, show me why this should be renewed. And so at this moment, I don't feel like I'm informed enough to answer that question, yes or no. But as a commissioner, I'm not going to be afraid to ask even my friends the hard questions of, you're going to get this sales tax money. You need to show me that it makes sense. And if it doesn't, I won't vote for it. And that might make some people mad that have supported me, and that's okay. But I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for anybody, and I'm not going to be a rubber stamp for city staff, for anybody who supported me, for anyone who didn't support me. It's you're going to have to justify going forward with it, no matter what. So
I think what some people would say to that question is, we've been stagnant for 10 years and they've had it for 10 years. So what if
yeah,
we,
I think they're so. First of all, the stagnant, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I've heard a lot of people talk about, oh, our population has gone down, and I think that's a little bit misleading because we have a lot of population growth happening outside of the city limits, and in an area that is a part of the city of Manhattan in every sense of the word except the legal one. And so I don't want to just totally say that we've been stagnant or had population decline. In the last census, Potawatomi County was the fastest growing county per capita in the state of Kansas, and that growth wasn't happening in Onega. So there has been growth, there has been population growth. It's happening outside city limits. So, but yeah, that's a fair argument, and you could make the argument that there are other factors that contributed to that, and housing is one of them. But I feel like there have been some wins that we've been getting that are positive for the community. And I
there's
also
been
think
some
that,
recent ones with that company that I can't remember their name, but they've got the welders,
yeah,
the 60 something app.
PKW and Blake's
Yeah.
building
And
out
then
there.
they got
Yeah,
the Amazon one coming in. So,
right, right.
but
So
they did
those are
lose
cool.
Haynes and we lost the country stampede some time ago.
Yeah. But I also want to say too, like it's not all about trying to go land a white whale business. I want to make sure, and the chamber has done good things here too, but to continue going forward to make sure that we're talking about sustaining and growing our own businesses as well. A lot of the for all the bringing in companies that I left K-State 20 years ago almost now. And at the time, a lot of my friends moved on and went somewhere else. And I always joke that the top selling shirt was "I miss Manhattan." Everybody wanted to be here, but the jobs just weren't there. And that has changed a lot in the last 20 years. But a big part of that change is Civic Plus and GTM, which it's unfortunate that they're leaving now. And I know both have been sold, but those were local companies. We didn't recruit someone to come here. Those were founded here. And I don't want to lose sight of that as an important thing too. Is helping grow companies here as well. In addition to, not instead of, in addition to luring outside companies to come here.
So the other thing with that too is a lot of the reason our population hasn't grown is we lost 4,000 students. So there we probably added a lot of people, but we lost a bunch of students at
Yeah,
the
and I
same
don't.
time.
I've been selling houses here for 13 years and been in and out of the community for 20 plus, and I feel anecdotally, and I can't just back this up with stats. Um, I feel anecdotally like we are less dependent on K-State and Fort Riley than we once were. I feel like we've diversified ourselves more, partly out of necessity as K-State's population has gone down, Fort Riley's population has gone down. That we would still be devastated, obviously, if there were major changes to either one of those. But just anecdotally, what I see out in the community is less of a dependence on those two entities, um, as we diversify our economy and get our own private employer base. So
I'm going to deviate a little off script because you brought up Potawatomi County on there. One of the things again we talked about at our last retreat was staff is looking at that 24 corridor and the idea. We had that Scorpius, which has pretty much fallen through out there. We bought the land for a fire station out there. When you talk about annexation, if you do it continue, if you don't island, if you do it contiguously, the city has a lot of power to do that with any dispute with the county. If you were to just, and this was brought up, just to annex straight down 24, and evidently there's some developers that want to do some residential, more apartments along that, but
Yes,
most of it would be
yes, yes,
commercial.
yes.
Yeah, and then evidently at the end of that big long line, there's a bubble of land that again could be, residential, and there's people interested. Leaving alone everybody who's out there now that's residential. They don't want to be part of the city. I think there's going to be issues long term with them because they're not going to be able to incorporate if Manhattan soaks up all the industrial
Yeah.
tax base, which is what this would do. But that's the big growth area. And what was talked about at the retreat was then almost doing like a tax district out there, so you could take the incremental income, put it right back into that area.
Right.
So it's not really a drain on the city, but the city's also not just pulling all the money out of the area that it's reinvesting it back in.
I think that makes a lot of sense. All that development out there is a missed opportunity, and it's, as I said, it's the city of Manhattan in every sense of the word except the legal one. And every day I talk to people who live out there who don't even realize that they're not in the city limits of Manhattan. So anything we can do to start adding to the tax base people who are using our services on a daily basis and not paying for it. And they already, and I know they pay for a markup, but they're already using city water and city sewer. They're now have city code inspection on new construction out there. It's a city of Manhattan in every sense of the word, except no one's gotten around to saying it's the city of Manhattan. And I understand that there's a lot of opposition out there, and I understand why. I'd probably be upset too. God help us if my mother-in-law is listening right now. But it makes a lot of sense on the commercial and industrial to do that first. Makes sense too. It's kind of a baby step. There's 15,000 people in Blue Township. If it were a city, it would be the biggest city in Pottawatomie County. And I don't feel like that them incorporating as another city makes sense. I think Johnson County can show us, where you have intersections where there's 4 different cities meeting at one point doesn't make a lot of sense. The repetition of services and the cost that's going to involve for them to spin up all of that infrastructure from scratch. But I also know that there's a lot of logistical challenges with retroactively annexing and bringing all that up to snuff. So, but I think in the short term, I'm definitely a proponent of at least exploring the idea of the commercial and industrial along the Highway 24 corridor. And I'm a when it makes sense, and I don't, I'm a density guy. I want to see more density, especially medium density in the residential world, and there's none in Blue Township. None. There are a few blocks of duplexes out there, but there is, as far as I can know, and I'm pretty confident in this, there is nothing more than 2 units of density in Blue Township at all, residential wise. So
now the other issue that pops up if that happens is that as the city expands that way, we mentioned the fire station, which you need that out there. Mm-hmm. That's really not the problematic one. Problem is, do you need a police substation?
Yeah, and just the whole, because we have the only consolidated police force in the state of Kansas, we're crossing that county line, and the deeper we go into Pottawatomie County, the more complicated that becomes too.
So, right, because I've talked to the county commissioners about the Riley County Commission, and they said there's no way we're building a substation in Pottawatomie County. I said, well, then how are you going to service that area?
We're not. Yeah, that's a problem, and that is going to have to involve the city, Pottawatomie County, Riley County, sitting down at a table and just figuring it out. And that's where I go back to just get stuff done. Like we have not done a very good job over the last 25 years of interagency cooperation at the elected level. I think, not necessarily at the staff level, but at the elected level of, and we see it with the aquatic center and all the complications of, if we put that in Seco Park, it's going to have to go on county land. How are we going to get the county and the school district and the city to sit down and talk to each other like grown-ups and figure that out? And that's a challenge. And I don't pretend to have a silver bullet answer, but that's one of the things that if elected, I want to work towards is, I don't care who gets credit for it. I don't care who gets blamed for it. Let's just all work together and do what's best for the community.
So, well, actually, We had one pop up that's related to that. You kind of touched on it, but we'll let you say it again since we just got the question again. Here on the like, are you in favor of annexing residential areas of Potawatomi County? Yes or no?
So it's hard to answer that in a yes or no question because I genuinely don't know even what the next step would be there. But I think it is in the long term interest of the community to do so. How do we do it? What does that look like? Can we do it? Those are all questions that I'm humble enough to say I don't have the answer to, but it feels inevitable. At some point, it's going to happen. A lot of the logistical concerns about it are going to be present ever now or 20 years from now, and many of them are just going to get worse as time progresses. So I think it makes
What
sense.
makes it tough is when Scorpius was being talked at and that analysis was done.
Yeah.
If the city wanted to annex the current residential out in Potawatomi County and you did it as part of Scorpius, if Scorpius would have really happened,
Yeah.
it would have pretty much been a net positive for the city because of what you mentioned before, having to bring everything up to snuff in Potawatomi County. As the city annexes everything and it already builds into their base budget all the industrial, if you just annex the residential all by itself without that industrial, it's a big bill.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I think that doesn't make sense. And, we just have to figure out a way. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be popular. But that's, to me, part of public service is sometimes you have to do things that are in the best interest of the community and may not be the most popular thing in the world. It's not going to get you on people's Christmas card list, but in the long run, it's necessary and prudent. So
we talked about the chamber some, but we didn't really touch on the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the transient guest tax part of it. And I've been an advocate the last few years, and as that's grown to quite a bit of money. And originally, the chamber kind of felt we get 60% no matter what, and I was, kind of went arguing against that, saying, well, why just get an extra $250,000 just because, it went up. And when we've got a lot of budget holes, we really run off of sales tax. And if you take the police department out, there's not much at all of the property tax and fees in there. And we do it by people constantly coming in, but they're constantly driving in our streets. We build those parking garages and things like that is, to use it and we have wide discretion on how to use that money, to use it, possibly for some street repair, to use it for some garage maintenance, use it for some of those other things to take some of the stress off the budget. And even police coverage. I wouldn't necessarily use it by statute. We can't use it to pay for the police.
Yeah, that was as I'm sitting here thinking about my answer.
But when you pay
the answer to what we can do,
right? But when you pay for some of these other things that right now are coming out of the general fund, you're easing the overall impact of everything that's there. And it seems like a lot of people on the current commission, it's really a sacred cow. It's like, no, we can't use it. We can use it for the CVB. We can use it for some other chamber stuff. We can use it for, say, downtown Manhattan, which I'm fine with, and Aggieville and those places. Yeah, I agree with all of that. But for garage maintenance, no, that's taboo. To use it for that. So anyway, I just want to get your opinion on it.
Yeah, like I said, I would have to, with the caveat of I don't know what the specific guardrails are by statute on what we can and can't use that money for. But within those guardrails, I'm not a person, I don't have sacred cows. Like, some things require more convincing of me than others, but I will listen to anything. And so I would not take off the table within the guardrails of what we are allowed to do by statute, thinking outside the box of
and that's what I'm saying. As long as you fit within the law, which is
And so I've told lots of people, my message to city staff if I get elected will be, I am not an expert in what you do. You are. So I'll listen to you, and I'm not going to try to do your job. But with the big but at the end of that sentence is, if I'm not a believer in just tell me no. If you're going to tell me I can't do something, you better be prepared. Whether it's city staff or anybody else, I need a reason. I need an actual reason, not just because that's not the way it's done. I don't operate that way. Like my belief is that the answer to the first question we should be asking is, should we do this? And if the answer to that question is yes, then let's figure out how. If the answer to that question is no, then it's no, and we can move on. And but what I hate seeing, and it's in government, in business, anywhere, is, well, just no. No. I hate that. That drives me insane. And so that's same thing here. Is, does it make sense to use this funding stream for this, and this, kind of somewhat creative, but still within the bounds of the law? And if the answer is yes to that, then let's figure it out. And so that's going to be my approach to just about anything. Is, okay, if we agree that this is something we want to do and that this is good for the community, then let's figure out how to do it. And, we have ordinances, but ordinances can be changed. If the ordinance says we can't do it, but we agree that it's dumb that the ordinance says that, then let's change the ordinance. Don't let that somebody somewhere said an ordinance that said we can't do this be in the way of what is the best for the community.
So I think we brought up this annexation stuff, so it keeps popping in.
Yeah. So I promise, Alex, I'm not being cagey. I'm not. This is just my genuine. So I guess the short answer would be yes. I am generally supportive of that, but it's a yes, but, because there's a big but at the end of it. Is, how do we do it? Because there's lots and lots and lots of big ticket items that are also unpopular that are wrapped up in that. So if you're just on a fundamentally philosophical, that community, that Blue Township, the Green Valley Road area, all of that development out there is the city of Manhattan in my mind. And I think in everybody out there's mind too. If somebody asks them where they live, they're going to say they live in Manhattan, because they do. It's just that we never got around to moving the line when we kept building all those houses. And now 25 years later, we're like, oh crap, what do we do? So philosophically, don't tell my mother-in-law, please. Philosophically, I am in favor of that, but logistically, we have to figure out how to do it. So
okay, well, last call. Go ahead.
I do have speaking of philosophical, I have a philosophical question for you, Scott.
Yeah.
So as a Manhattan citizen, you've been here for a long time. Is there anything that the city commission has done in the past that you just were strongly disagreed with, and that if you had been on at the time, you would have done differently? Does anything jump to mind?
I think in general, I'm going to be the person that, and John, you and I have talked about this before, where I'm just not a person that feels like the city commission should be fighting the culture wars on either side of the aisle. There's once in a generation situations that come up that need to be dealt with, but anytime, in my mind, 99 times out of 100, when we start talking about these hot button social issues, we're talking about stuff that is not our job to do. We're buying dump trucks and paving roads and doing these, so much of it is just about running a city. So that doesn't mean that I'm closing off to those issues ever. But by and large, I'm not. Those issues are to be decided in Topeka and Washington, D.C. For the most part, the day-to-day bread and butter, we're just running a city. And so I'm going to be the person that I'm not here to talk about those things. And I think probably for a lot of your members, and I'll just be perfectly candid about this, if one of those issues come up, you may not like the way I vote on it. But what I can tell you is that for the most part, it's going to be pretty rare that I'm going to be the one bringing it up. So I really feel pretty strongly that local government is meant for these just bread and butter, not sexy, boring to normal people things that just go unnoticed by most, but it's what local government should be doing.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, and so as bicultural issues, I assume you're talking about things like maybe true colors, trans issues, things like that. They're in the national news. But
those are just,
unfortunately,
in
isn't
my
there the
opinion,
possibility that those are being injected into the discussion of the city government because those entities are requesting city funds, and you would have to make a decision?
yeah, and I said at the time, I was in public comment on those. I was on the special law call when that issue first came up, and True Colors requested $10,000. They, in my opinion, met the criteria that had been given to us, or that we felt like we had been given, and that criteria has been adjusted somewhat since then, or clarified might be a better word. And I felt that I voted as a special alcohol member to provide that funding. I said in commission meeting that if I don't know what the inverse of True Colors would be, but if that organization were to exist and were to apply for $10,000 from special alcohol and met the criteria that we felt like we had set out, I would have funded them too. So I don't think it means that nobody that is dealing with the social issue can apply for social services funds. I think it means that as a commission, we're not fighting those battles. It's if a some sort of right-leaning organization were to be on that list as a city commissioner, I'm not going to be micromanaging how that board decided to allocate those funds, because we have delegated that responsibility to them, and except in extreme circumstances, I want to respect their decision.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yep. And I got a little follow up on that, because obviously this was one where we disagree, and I felt that organization was more harm than good. But it, as Ed mentioned, was laid out in front of us for a city commission decision. But there was one here recently where the city commission injected itself into something that wasn't brought in front of the city commission, and that had to do with a Medicaid expansion.
Yeah.
And so they did a vote to do a recommendation to the Topeka, and I said at the time, so that's not our job. That why are we getting involved in that, which is a very partisan issue? Our recommendation means nothing,
right?
Frankly, why are we doing it? And I, sent my own thing to the same list they sent it to, and said I was the lone, vote, sure. and here's why. And I really thought that was something where the commission interjected itself, unlike the one we just talked about with True Colors, where kind of just came out there and you had to do something with the city. So and there are certain ones that are Topeka issues that we have called home rule. Like, in other words, they're going to do something that's going to affect like how much we can tax or something like
major pet peeve of mine. I always say I remember the days when Republicans used to believe in home rule, but the current majority in the legislature couldn't possibly care less about home rule at this point. Lots of policies where I don't believe the legislature. I believe the legislature is unnecessarily tying the hands of local government for their own political purposes. Frankly, I think it's largely political theater. But to go back to the original question and in your specific example of Medicaid expansion, I would say that that's something that's not a priority of mine as a commissioner. I don't know. I'm almost I've thought about this if I was ever in the legislature, and a lot of these proclamations and whatnot that have no force of law, that I think what in a lot of those situations, I would lean towards an abstention from that vote. It's not even for or against. It's just, I'm not participating in this. And I'm not saying specifically that one, but in general, those types of things where we're making what is essentially political theater, we're trying to make a statement that has no force of law, is not, then that's kind of where I come in general on those things. Is I'm out.
Yeah.
I don't want.
Well, yes, to me, because that one we created a big argument, created a lot of tension, a lot of hard feelings for something that was really meaningless.
Yep. Yeah, I'm not a big. I mean, I'm fine with the proclamations where we're just somebody won state championship or whatever. These things where we're just acknowledging things, and the legislature does it way more than the city commission, where we're these resolutions and things have it in Congress too. No force of law whatsoever. It's just political grandstanding. And I have no interest in that. I have no time for that. So I can tell you something like that would not be something that most likely comes from me.
So, okay, no, well, we've gone over an hour here, about an hour and 15 minutes. Really appreciate you coming on, Scott, and want to give you a chance to wrap up and, you know, give a little summation statement and tell people why they should vote for Scott Seel.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time. This has always been, I'm always been a believer that I'll come talk to anybody. I think a lot of us, if we were to sit down in a coffee shop together, we probably would have a lot of things that we disagree on. And so what I would, my message to your members and to like-minded people is that in spite of that, in spite of the things that we disagree on, I can promise that my door will always be open. I'm open to criticism. I'm open to having my mind changed. And I will vote sometimes in ways that frustrate you. But I've never been someone that can't change their mind. So I want to focus on the real issues and just like I said, like I've always said, getting stuff done and solving problems. And so wherever that puts me on the political spectrum, I don't know. I've kind of stopped trying to even care about that because it doesn't have any effect on the day-to-day operations of people's lives, and that's what I want to focus on. Is just making this a better place to live, better place to run a business, and a better place to raise a family. So I appreciate your vote, and if if you can't do that, I understand, and then that's the way the system is supposed to work. So I'm going to be me. I'm going to be authentic, and I'm never going to try to cater to whoever I'm talking to. It's going to be the same message, no matter who it is. And if I'm working with other candidates or working with other people, I'm going to have my own vote and my own ideas. And just because a particular group or a candidate may have supported me doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be in lockstep with them. I've never been very good at doing as I'm told. So I will vote my conscience and what I think is best. And the next time an election comes around, I'll either win or lose, and that'll be it. So,
Scott, do you have a website or a social
yeah, I
media
do.
anybody can go to if they want to?
ScottSeelMHK.com. That's Scott with two T's, and then Seel is spelled wrong. It's SEEL. So ScottSeelMHK.com. Some issue profile stuff on there, ability to donate, and then I also have a Facebook page. And I really, I mean it when I say this. A lot of times I'll try to stay off social media flame wars, but I will sit down and have coffee with anybody, and we'll hash it out. We may or may not agree when we're done, but I'll be cordial and respectful and listen to what you have to say, and hope to ask for the same in return. And we will depart as friends, whether we agree with each other or not. So,
okay, thanks a lot, Scott.
Yeah.
For our Manhattan folks, next Thursday at 7 o'clock, we're hoping to have Jim Morrison on. Originally, we were going to have Larry Fox because we're doing this in the order of people answer the question, but Larry's going to be at the K-State game in Ireland. So we should have Jim and then either Peter or Larry after that. Those are all the ones that we have answers in now. I know Amber Starling's talked to me. We'll hopefully get hers in soon, and hopefully we'll get the other candidates and be able to give everyone out there. We will be posting Scott's written answers to all the questions online. We didn't get to every single one. They weren't necessarily asked the same way, so you can go in there and take a look at that. Again, thanks, Scott. Thanks for all those who participated and watched, and we'll see you again next Thursday.
Thanks, folks. Have a good evening.